G'day, welcome to Navadia. Hi everyone, and first of all, thank you! Woo! Yes! It's really good to see since my NASA check has dried up, YouTube has taken up some of the slack and has monetized me! I honestly could not have done it without your support. Thank you to everyone who has watched, shared, liked, subscribed, and has just been there for me. Oh, and don't forget to watch, share, like, and subscribe and all that sort of thing. I still need to maintain a level of watch hours or they will take away that monetization away from me. Since the plague has started, myself and many of my YouTube friends have noticed a massive drop in views and watch time. So if you haven't seen any videos of your favorite content creators, please check if you're still subscribed and go give their videos a watch. I've linked a few of my favorite people below. They're not all skeptical thinking channels. I have a few pagan, gaming, science and animal channels I'd like to watch, so you should go check them out. Hey, post-editing Mero here. I am so sorry. I just worded that incredibly badly. I apologize to everybody in my audience that is pagan. I did not actually mean to say that pagans are not critical thinkers. I did not mean to say that at all. I just worded that really, really badly. A lot of pagans are very amazing critical thinkers. Ocean, for example, is one of the best critical thinkers that I have come across, and he is also pagan. Massive apologies for that. I am just a terrible person when it comes to expressing myself at times. Sorry about that. This week I saw a video come out and I really had to respond to it. It's a TikTok video called 12 Reasons Christianity is True. I found it through Twitter, so of course I left a link to the Twitter post where I found it. Before I tackle the arguments that Christianity is true, I want to talk a little bit about my problems with apologetics. First things first, I'm going to define apologetics and talk a little bit about the etymology of the word. It has roots in the Greek word apologetikos, meaning defensible. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines it as a branch of theology devoted to the defense of the divine origin and authority of Christianity. Some Christians define apologetics as the logical defense of the Christian faith. Basically, apologetics is defending a religion. It is not necessarily focused on Christianity. You also get apologetics for other religious faiths, such as Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and others. You can even get apologetics within sects of a religion too. Jehovah's Witnesses have a lot of apologetics when it comes to shunning their family members or refusing to accept life-saving blood transfusions. Some people even take it outside of a religious setting. For example, creationists talk about evolution apologetics as if people who understand the scientific consensus that evolution real are dishonest hacks, which is simultaneously hilarious and infuriating because they will also proudly exclaim that they're Christian apologetics. Also, there's no such thing as evolution apologetics. You don't need to logically defend something that is real. My first contention with apologetics is that if your faith needs people to be trained logically to defend against attacks, then I kind of wonder if your faith is actually logically sound. I mean, if you need to use your logic to defend your position when critically analysing it will tear your position apart, then I think it's on fairly weak ground to begin with. One such example is God exists because look at the beauty of nature. When thinking about it, even just for 15 seconds, you can find many examples of nature being ugly, cruel, dirty, and extremely unpleasant. One of my favourite is the cordyceps fungus, which infects ants and causes them to climb above their nest, clamp onto a leaf, and the fungus bursts through its bodies, showering the nest with its spores, infecting the entire colony. By the way, the ant is alive during this entire process. Yeah, real pretty. Beyond that, I have noticed there are no apologetics for the Christian faith that aren't rooted in a logical fallacy, with the exception of one which is the Modal Ontological argument by Alvin Plantinga. It basically goes like this. It is possible that God exists. If it is possible that God exists, then God exists in some possible worlds. If God exists in some possible worlds, then God exists in all possible worlds. If God exists in all possible worlds, then God exists in the actual world. If God exists in the actual world, then God exists. Conclusion, therefore God exists. However, you could argue, it is possible that Superman exists. If it is possible that Superman exists, then Superman exists in some possible worlds. If Superman exists in some possible worlds, then Superman exists in all possible worlds. If Superman exists in all possible worlds, then Superman exists in the actual world. If Superman exists in the actual world, then Superman exists. Conclusion, Superman exists. In other words, you can use that argument to prove the existence of anything, rendering the apologetic useless. Which comes to my third problem with apologetics. If your faith needs to be defended logically, and you use logical fallacies to defend your faith, then doesn't that mean your faith is not actually logically sound? I'll talk about the 12 arguments presented in the video later, but let's have a look at some of the ones that he doesn't bring up and why they are logical fallacies. The look at the trees argument. Appeal to nature. And as I mentioned earlier on, not a very good argument. If God doesn't exist, then why do so many people believe in him? Appeal to majority. Easily explained away by indoctrination as children, social pressures, etc. This really smart person believed in God, therefore God exists. Appeal to authority. Linus Pauling, a Nobel Prize laureate, popularized the idea that vitamin C stops people from getting the common cold. There has been no evidence to support this hypothesis, which means that even incredibly smart people can be wrong. God exists because I had a personal experience. Anecdotal evidence. I also had a spiritual experience once. I heard a voice in my head when I went past my friend's shrine to Uset, the Egyptian queen of the gods, who unfortunately also shares a name with the terrorist group. She told me that I should have a shower. So I did. I was also running a high fever at the time and probably should have been in hospital, not at my friend's house. Anecdotal evidence is not accepted as proof. People use anecdotal evidence to say something cured their cancer, where it could have been one of those very rare occasions where their immune system figured out their cancer was killing them. There's a reason why science doesn't accept the people saying homeopathy helped them over some sort of illness or injury. The aggregate data says it literally does nothing. I believe in God because I can't understand how you wouldn't. That is an appeal to incredulity. You would also reject someone's claim if the basis of their argument is, I can't believe you would do that. I wouldn't. I believe in God because I have nothing to lose. Pascal's wager as well as hedging your bets fallacy. This is no different to, I know this probably won't work, but what's the harm? Usually it actually causes harm. For example, people take multivitamins, but there's no evidence to suggest that they do anything if a person has a healthy diet. So what's the harm? Well, you're spending a lot of money on something that doesn't work. You're also making your kidneys do more work than they need to. Long-term consumption of dietary supplements are linked to liver and kidney damage. There's thousands of apologetics that I could debunk, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to debunk the ones in this video. His first claim is we need an objective moral source. My argument is, do we really? Think about it. Is it absolutely necessary to have objective morals? I mean, as long as we have morals, does it really matter if they're objective or not? I'm not going to argue whether morality is objective or subjective because this isn't the claim. The claim is we need one, and I'm not convinced we do. Let's go completely naturalistic. We evolved into a social species. The thing with social species, there needs to be a moral code that is encouraged within the group so it doesn't collapse. The objective standard of the moral code could include things like sharing excess resources to keep the group from starving, or don't murder individuals in the group to encourage genetic diversity and group cohesion. In one group, the leaders could be female and is a matriarchy, where the other could be patriarchal and the leaders are male. In a world where there's objective morality, you would only see the one moral code. But there isn't. For example, there are Christians that are totally okay with the GRSM community, and there's ones that aren't. Something that's completely okay with a German could be extremely offensive to someone from, say, India. Just this wide range of moral grounding would suggest to me that we don't need objective morals. We just need to agree on a range of acceptable moral behaviours within a group. If they're subjective and they still work, then why do we actually need an objective moral basis? His second argument is there's over 5,000 New Testament manuscripts. That's a non sequitur. The number of manuscripts is meaningless to its truth value. It just means it's widely copied. The mere existence of several copies of a newspaper doesn't mean all the articles within it are true. I mean, if The Onion produces a best-selling novel, it doesn't suddenly make all of their claims not satire. His next claim is Jesus' disciples died proclaiming the resurrection of Christ. Another non sequitur. Just because people died for their beliefs, it doesn't make their claims any truer. Let's have a look at Heaven's Gate. 39 people killed themselves believing their deaths would take them to an extraterrestrial spacecraft following the comet Hale-Bopp. We see people killing themselves and others in the name of their faith. Jehovah's Witnesses will die before accepting a blood transfusion claiming they will come back later in the new system. None of these claims have been proven to be true despite the beliefs of their people. An apologist may say about these examples, the people weren't in a position to know if their beliefs were true, but the disciples of Jesus would definitely know for sure. However, the historical evidence for these deaths happening is very weak, and that they died defending a resurrected Jesus is entirely undocumented. Early Christians were arrested for disturbing the peace, not for their beliefs. The many recorded miracles is a claim he made with no supporting evidence or examples. Which miracles are you talking about? The Shroud of Turin? That was debunked in 1390 when a local bishop wrote that the artist confessed it was a forgery. Since then, there's been increasingly more accurate debunkings of the shroud, so that's definitely not a thing. Okay, what about the weeping statues? Most of them have been found to be trickery, such as injecting liquids into porous stones, which then seeps out as tears. Oil mixed with fat was applied to the eyes, so when ambient temperatures increased, the fat will melt, causing an appearance of tears. Okay, what about when people get healed by prayer? Numerous studies have shown that prayer doesn't do anything in regards to the outcome of recovery from an illness or injury, and in fact may be detrimental because of the pressure put on the person to get better. Personally, I am waiting for an amputee to grow back their limb, or a mountain throwing itself into a sea, like the Bible says Jesus' followers can do. What about the miracles in the New and Old Testament? There's just not enough evidence to suggest they happened. The vast majority of miracle claims have had naturalistic explanations, and if scientists can't explain what has happened, that's not necessarily proof that a miracle has occurred. It just means more investigation is warranted. His claim for there's lots of scientific evidence for the soul is great. I'm not a neurologist, so I can't say if that's true or not, but let's just say the soul does exist. How does that explain Christianity? Many religions have a concept of a soul. Animism is the concept that all things, animate or inanimate, possess a soul or a soul-like construct. Using that argument to prove Christianity basically also proves all animist religions. There's no contradictions in the Bible. There's over 63,000. There's like 6 in the first page of Genesis. Apologists are trained to harmonize them and come up with some sort of mental gymnastics so both can be true, even though they are diametrically opposing statements. Possible explanations don't have to be plausible for a Christian to declare it not a contradiction. And this is what I'm talking about when it comes to apologetics. It's just mental gymnastics that is not rooted in reality. Jesus fulfills Old Testament prophecy. The problem with prophecies are manifold. Usually they are vague, non-specific, and can be interpreted in many ways. For example, a person can predict a golden-crowned king will unleash war upon the earth, and that could relate to Donald Trump, who is blonde, or the English King John I, who fought wars all over England and was also blonde. A good prophecy needs to be specific, accurate, and unambiguous, and of course, ideally written before the events of the prophecy. Historians date many of the books of the Old Testament hundreds of years later than typical apologists will admit. If someone in the year 1250 said the year 2020 will be momentous in history because there will be fires in Australia, a disease so bad it will stop people from saying its name on YouTube, and a social upheaval against centuries of discrimination against people in its first 6 months, that would be a prophecy. Like, that is a definite prophecy. And yet none of the prophecies that I have read in regards to Jesus fulfills any of these criteria. In Genesis 3:15a, he would be born of a woman. So every person assigned male at birth then? Genesis 3:15b also says he will reconcile people to God. So every priest, imam, and Cohen can be described as such? Genesis 3:15c says he will crush evil at his own expense. So it's Gandhi. He was human, he was a spiritual leader, and he did a lot of things in regards to promoting non-violence at his own personal expense. I'm not going to go into the weird things he used to do, but at the very least, on the surface, Mahatma Gandhi fulfills all of the Genesis prophecy requirements, at least at that point in the book. From Genesis 22:18 to 49:10, it predicts he will be a descendant of Abraham, a descendant of Abraham's son Isaac, a descendant of Isaac's son Jacob, and a descendant of Jacob's son Judah. Why the Bible couldn't just say he would be a descendant of Jacob's son Judah, I personally do not know. However, that means everyone from that bloodline has a shot of being the Messiah. Isaiah, which is a different part of the Bible, also says he would be a descendant of Jesse, a descendant of Judah, and he would be a descendant of Jesse's son, King David. Again, the Bible could have just said Jesus would be the descendant of King David and cut out the superfluous information. Also, why did Genesis finish where it did and Isaiah pick up the last two people? Consistency! God! Genesis also mentions he would appear after a succession of rulers from the tribe of Judah. That's more accurate, isn't it? No, because it doesn't say how long after. Granted, in the NIV, Daniel 9:25 says, "Know and understand this, from the time the world goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with the streets in a trench, but in times of trouble." But what is a 7? Is it more or less than a duck? What is the 7 to heat lamp conversion rate? I need to know these things. If a 7 is 7 years, then yeah, that makes sense. But what if a 7 is actually an exponent and we're waiting 7 years to the 7th power, which is 823,543 years? Add that to the 3,521,614,606,208 years, which is 62 to the 7th power, and that's kind of our time frame. That actually might explain the reason why Christ hasn't returned. I'm being unfair because Daniel 9:25 and 9:26 says he would appear after the rebuilding of Jerusalem, and he would appear before the Roman destruction of Jerusalem. That's a lot more accurate. However, Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Jerusalem 580 BCE and completely razed it to the ground. Are they honestly expecting us to believe it took a very powerful city to be remade in slightly less than 600 years? Yeah, that's a pretty long time. Yeah, it wouldn't be back to its original self, but with enough building materials and people, it would become a functioning city within a few decades. So, being really generous, I'd give it 200 years to be rebuilt. That means there's approximately a 400-year gap in which Jesus could have been born. And again, that's being really generous. Jerusalem could have very easily been rebuilt and functioning in 50 to 100 years. I mean, I'm not a historian and I literally know nothing about this, so please don't take my word for it. But I think you're kind of getting my point. It's not a prophecy with such a huge gap. But even the prophecy claiming it would be Rome doesn't specifically say Rome will destroy Jerusalem. It says, the people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come in a flood. War will continue until the end and desolations have been decreed. I mean, if Jerusalem gets destroyed today, that Bible passage will still apply. Again, I think I'm making my point. Just because Jesus fulfilled the Bible prophecies, they're so vague and have multiple ways of interpreting them, most of them could be fulfilled by many different people. I've left a link below in the website where I got these examples from, so you can read the prophecies for yourself. And honestly, have fun going through history, finding people that could also be Jesus. Frankly, I've seen some of Jesus's prophecies that apply to me. I've been rejected before. Paul's conversion is the next proof for Christianity. Christians specifically talk about the miracle of Saul's conversion to Christianity. He basically sees a bright light, he falls down and hears a voice asking why he persecutes Christians. His travelling companions also hear this, depending on which passage in Acts. In one, telling they hear things, and in another, they don't. Saul is then rendered blind for 3 days, and he did not eat or drink anything until a servant of Jesus healed him. Okay, so what's your evidence? You can't use the Bible because that's the thing making the claim. But even if I were to grant you that Paul existed and he did experience this miracle, what's to say he didn't have some sort of epileptic seizure? They can cause visual and auditory hallucinations. He saw a light, fell to the ground, and heard voices. Paul himself describes this experience as a vision. In 2 Corinthians 12, he admits he doesn't know if he was in the body or out of the body when this happens. What about his travelling companions? They said they heard someone talking. Saul was a guy who was on a murderous rampage. Do you think they're going to disagree with him? And being blind for 3 days after and not eating or drinking? Maybe he hit his head when he fell and was badly injured. Maybe he wasn't blinded at all and some retelling of the story decided to add this bit of literary device. These are all much more plausible explanations than God came to earth and stopped someone killing all the Christians. And even if I grant it did happen, why isn't God back on earth telling people to stop persecuting Christians right now? Did he only have one miracle discount card? His amazing prophecies and Daniel argument is pretty much the same argument I have from earlier. Biblical prophecies aren't great. I'm also going to link a video to Paulogia's explanation on prophecies using Spider-Man as an example of literary devices. The no evidence for atheism claim is a straw man. There's plenty of evidence for atheism. The main one is, I don't think you have met the burden of proof that God exists, therefore I don't think he does. You're the one that's making the claim. You need to provide the proof. But let's say there is no evidence of atheism. How does that prove Christianity? I mean, there's millions of Jews, Muslims, Hindus, pagans, Buddhists, and beliefs that are practiced by indigenous cultures worldwide. And that's just the extant religions. What about the extinct ones? Or what about the Daedric princes of Tamriel, the drowned god of the Ironborn, which is practiced on the Iron Islands in Westeros? Or Melkor, who was worshipped by the Númenóreans in Middle-earth? The argument that there is no evidence for atheism does not at all impact on the existence of Christianity. His argument that Christianity survived intense persecution is also not a claim that helps support Christianity. Do you know what else survived intense persecution? Indigenous cultures. By Christians. Guess what? They still exist. Does that make them true too? His last point is that the universe needs an explanation for its existence. Why? Why must we have one? It's incredibly likely we will never get one. That still doesn't negate the fact that the universe exists. Not everything needs an explanation. I mean, just because we can't explain the origins of life, does that mean we suddenly poof out of existence? Also, he's using the logical fallacy of God of the gaps. Just because we don't know something, it doesn't mean that God did it. It means we just don't have the information yet. It is unlikely, but possible we will figure out how the universe started sometime in the future. He's also referencing the Kalam ontological argument. William Lane Craig lays it out as such. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Given the conclusion, the universe has a cause. If the universe has a cause, then an uncaused personal creator of the universe exists who, without the universe, is beginningless, changeless, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, and enormously powerful. Therefore, an uncaused personal creator of the universe exists who, without the universe, is beginningless, changeless, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, and infinitely powerful. Do I really need to go into the Kalam ontological argument? It has been debunked so many times. One of the problems which I figured out around age 10 was, why is God special? Why can God exist without a beginning, but the universe can't? Often people will say, oh, but God's not of this universe. He's created it. Therefore, he's not bound by the laws of the universe. Of course, duh. Whoa. Where'd those goalposts go? You demand that the universe can't exist without a creator, yet you're okay with the creator not having one? And even if God created the universe, he can't actually interfere in said universe or he would cease to exist. He broke the laws of physics to create the universe. One of his properties described by William Lane Craig is that he's timeless. Time is one of the dimensions in this universe. It is reasonable, therefore, to say he cannot exist in this universe. So he's effectively dead. Another one of his properties, according to William Lane Craig, is that God is immaterial. So a timeless, immaterial creature means that you can't see it because it has no physical properties, and you can't interact with it because it doesn't change over time. I could be reading this wrong, but did William Lane Craig just effectively disprove God? Good work, mate. The funniest thing about the Kalam cosmological argument is that it was originally written by a Muslim man to prove Allah, which was based on a philosophy by Aristotle. So even though it's a favourite amongst Christians, it can still be used to prove pretty much any deity, which, of course, makes it a useless argument for Christianity. I know we've heard these arguments over and over again, but seriously, if these are the best arguments Christianity can come up with, Christianity is screwed. And here's why. I have not taken any classes on philosophy at all, even online courses in my spare time. I haven't read any form of philosophy at all in my lifetime. I know literally nothing about it. I am a scientist. Yes, philosophy is important in science, but I work with things more like microbes and chemical reactions. I have no idea what philosophy is, and yet even I can debunk these arguments. With my utter ignorance in this field, I can look at all of these arguments and tell you exactly what is wrong with them. These 12 points do not at all prove Christianity. The fact that people tout them as irrefutable proof for Christianity that has been debunked by an absolute noob, you have to ask yourself, how solid is the logic your faith is based upon? Because, in my opinion, it's pretty flimsy. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video, and thank you again so much for your support. And don't forget, don't give yourself the raw prawn. And I just want to say a very special thank you to my wonderful patrons for your amazing support, especially my $10 Redback Spider patrons, Aided Furball, Lauren Hart, Amanda Vogue, Mary Civitano, Russ Devereux, and Atheist Pastor. And I also want to say a very special thank you to my $35 Irukandji patron, Osmond Cometh.